Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is the 20th game in the series, and now, suddenly, I feel old. It's the third entry in the rebooted Modern Warfare subseries, but unlike the first two games, this one was developed by Sledgehammer Games, not Infinity Ward. So there's a running gag in the gaming community that many self-proclaimed hardcore players use against each other as an underhanded insult. The line that's used basically is this: why don't you go and play Call of Duty? The purpose of this line is to attack someone's ability to play more challenging games, which for someone like myself, that's an absurd argument. This line, why don't you play this game, which is aimed at casuals, and since you complain about this game, then you must be a casual, and the game's not for you. It's such a disgusting, insane, elitist fanboy drivel comment, because the only thing it does is reveal just how insecure such a person who uses this language really is. That they feel the need to defend a product that A, you didn't help create, B, you're not employed by any company who had any involvement in making the product you're blindly defending, and C, you're attempting to mask any form of legitimate criticism against the product you're shilling for. We see this a lot with the Souls community, which is a cult of personality similar to MAGA, just in video game form. I've had many arguments with ignorant clowns in the gaming community, but never once have I used Call of Duty as an insult to express my argument. Call of Duty is, and always will be, a franchise aimed at a casual audience, just like most other video game franchises. People look down on Call of Duty, specifically hardcore players, because of the sheer volume of success the series has had. It's one of the best-selling video game franchises of all time. The only other franchise that competes with Call of Duty at the levels these games sell each year is Grand Theft Auto. No other franchise remotely comes close to selling the numbers that Call of Duty sells and continues to sell each year. The series basically has a monopoly on first-person shooters. That's how successful the games are. And there's a pocket of individuals who don't like that, clearly. There's people who genuinely despise Call of Duty, claiming that it's the same thing each year, which in general, it does have some truth to it. But if you look at just the campaigns alone, these games differ quite a bit from each other, both in story and in gameplay. And here's the real truth. Most of them are actually quite good. These aren't inherently bad games, and I'm not going to throw acid at the series just because it's popular. When I criticize something and say something's not good, it's not out of spite against the franchise or the people that make it. It's purely because the product is weak, and it deserves to be framed as such. I'm not going to jump on a bandwagon and blindly claim that the Call of Duty games are bad games because it's just not true. These are genuinely good games that have problems like anything else. Now, with all that said, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, 2023, is horrible. It's fucking terrible. This is a bad game. There's no two ways about it. It's a disaster from start to finish. I can't believe Activision had the balls to release this catastrophe. There is nothing good about this game, maybe with the exception of one campaign mission. One, and that's debatable within of itself. Everything else is below the bar, dog shit piled on top of more dog shit, 2 middle fingers up, 2 thumbs down, complete bullshit. It's a bad game, and I'm not going to hold back or sugarcoat saying as much. Nothing in this game works. It is so bad that they should have canceled it and started over from the beginning. That's how bad this game is. Let's start with the story. Once again, the game, like the last two, follows Special Operations Unit Task Force 141, a multinational task force who makes it their mission to hunt down a terrorist causing panic in the world. This time, it's a Russian ultranationalist named Vladimir Makarov. And this is what we've been waiting for since they first announced that Modern Warfare was going to be rebooted. Everyone couldn't wait to see what they were going to do with Vladimir Makarov. How was the character going to be portrayed in the reboot? Was he going to be similar to the original version? Is the rebooted version somehow going to overcome the original version? What are they going to do with Makarov? Well, I'll tell you what they did with him. They didn't do shit with this character. Makarov is barely in the game, which is part of the problem. Most of Makarov's story in the rebooted Modern Warfare series takes place behind the scenes. There's one flashback stage where it explains why Makarov was captured and sentenced to a maximum security prison in the Gulag. This entire flashback stage happened because he launched an attack on the Verdansk Stadium, which his purpose for doing so was only to attract Russia's attention, because he was upset with the Kremlin for stripping Makarov of his honors in the military for trying and failing to maintain control of Urzikstan. When the Urzikstan Liberation Force took back the country, Makarov threw a hissy fit, joined Connie Group, and launched a terrorist attack because he's a petulant little child with a temper tantrum. This, I'm sure, is not what players had in mind when Makarov's name was mentioned at the end of Modern Warfare 2. The character isn't even captured at the end of this game. He kills Soap and then escapes, leaving the end of the game on a cliffhanger. Why would you do that? It renders the entire game pointless. Everything that happened in the story was meaningless. They even brought back Graves, who apparently faked his death in the last game. I'm sorry. What? The whole purpose of the last stage in the game is to stop Makarov from destroying the channel tunnel of UK's train network, and he can apparently do this with something that sits on a flash drive. I'm sorry. What? Everything that happens in this game makes Task Force 141 look like a team of clowns who can't do their jobs properly. There's no point in being invested into this nonsense anymore. None whatsoever. Then we have the gameplay. And just what the hell were they thinking? The big new idea in this are these open combat missions. Call of Duty has never done this before, and for a good reason. Open combat missions are essentially missions that are placed in a confined open world map. The concept is that the player has the freedom to choose how they approach objectives. You can choose between open combat, to using stealth, to using ambush tactics. There's an on-screen map of the area, as well as a tactical map that highlights objectives and equipment. There's caches of weapons, gear, and specialized equipment on hand. Enemy AI reacts according to the situation. If sighted, they will hunt the player down upon losing sight of them, and will call in reinforcements if their numbers start to decrease. The open combat missions are without a doubt the worst idea that's ever been implemented in a Call of Duty game. To put this into greater perspective, there's 18 missions in this game. Just 6 of these missions are open combat missions, while the rest are standard scripted Call of Duty missions. The open combat missions are so egregiously bad that they ruin the entire campaign. That's how bad they are, and the first one is introduced right as soon as you start the second stage after the prologue prison break level with Makarov. So the game is a piece of shit literally from the second level onwards. The open combat missions are very poorly designed regardless of what difficulty setting you set at the start of the game. These missions are filled with meandering objectives that ultimately mean nothing. You can either waste your time completing them, or you can bum rush your way to the main objective to get through the story. If you're playing on an easier difficulty setting, these missions don't last that long. They're too short for the content to be sustainable. And if you're playing on veteran difficulty or higher, as I did, the open combat missions will waste long stretches of your time because there's no consistent checkpoints. The game will only give you a checkpoint once you've completed a main objective, meaning you have to suffer your way through a sea of enemies, literally just to do one small task to get a checkpoint, and often that's much easier said than done. These open combat missions don't really have any story in them. They're mainly just a mindless, never-ending wave of enemies, with random pickups scattered throughout the stage. The worst thing you can do as a player in these missions is become spotted by the AI, which is inevitable. Once the alarm sounds and the enemy is aware of your presence in an open combat mission, the AI automatically knows your location and will converge on you relentlessly and endlessly throughout the stage. Because of this terrible level design, the only viable way to play through the open combat missions is to use stealth, which makes all of the guns that don't have a silencer attachment on them utterly useless. This removes the point of hunting down any other non-silencer weapons that are found in the maps. The worst mission in the entire game, and maybe even the entire series itself, is easily High Rise, without question. As the character Gaz, you play through a stage that's filled to the brim with terrible level design, in which the player has to ascend this building to reach the top. You can move both inside and outside 2 different buildings. The problem is actually getting to your destination. while avoiding combat as much as you can, because like the other open combat missions, as soon as you're spotted by the AI, an alarm sounds off across the entire span of the map, and you're immediately bombarded with endless waves of enemies, which is a nightmare on veteran difficulty. To make things worse, your objective isn't really to get to the top. It's to get to the top as quickly as possible. In order to do that, you need a device called an ascender, which will allow you to ascend to the top of the building with ease. But the device is located in a very specific spot, and if you die before you get there, or you just happen to pass by it and not recognize that you've done so, which is very easy to do, and you die before picking it up, guess what? You start from the beginning of the fucking stage to try getting to it all over again. Each time you start from the beginning of the stage, you lose progress that you've already made, forcing you to retrace your steps to try and get farther with each attempt. What this does to the gameplay loop is it makes the game extremely repetitive to an insane level, to the point where you'll want to pull your fucking hair out. And like the other open combat missions, you have to do all of this with no AI companions, all by yourself. The lack of checkpoints combined with the fact that you can't stop the waves of enemy units from hunting you down once you're spotted makes these open combat missions a complete joke. Not only are these missions dreadfully painful to play, but the worst part about them is that they take away from what Call of Duty does best. A good Call of Duty campaign is designed to carefully guide the player along with a squad of teammates, which gives not only the feeling of camaraderie, but it also makes the gameplay fair. You don't have to fight waves upon waves of enemies by yourself because you almost always have some sort of backup with your team. With these open combat missions, the devs at Sledgehammer said, fuck that, we don't feel like it, or we forgot to give you a squad, and just designed them as is. These missions objectively go against everything that's good about what a standard, typical Call of Duty campaign experience is. What's wrong with one of these combat missions is what's wrong with all of them, because they're each designed the exact same way, with the exact same issues and design flaws. Even when you arrive to a normal mission, they're not very good either, mainly because of how short they are. And they don't truly offer anything different that Call of Duty hasn't already done before. Many of the stages across the game are filled with damage sponge enemies wearing body armor as well. So much so that they drain what minimal fun is left over out that hasn't already been sucked into a vacuum by the open combat missions. The biggest problem with Modern Warfare 3 is that the game is simply rushed. You can tell by its overall length, which is the shortest Call of Duty campaign in the entire series.
I get it. I'm not gonna stand up here making long speeches. I'm gonna stick to the script. No 8-minute speech like last year. But fun fact, my speech was actually longer than this year's Call of Duty campaign. What?
The reason for this is simple. Sledgehammer was initially tasked with designing an expansion for Modern Warfare 2. This was until series publisher Activision stepped in and forced Sledgehammer to turn what was supposed to be a simple expansion into an entire game to pose as a direct sequel for the last one. And they were to do this within 1 year's time. This is why the open combat missions are so bad, because they're clearly meant to be a part of the game's multiplayer. They're not supposed to be campaign missions in the first place. This also explains why the campaign is so short. If you look closely at the release years for Modern Warfare, the first game, and Modern Warfare 2, the second game, there's a 3-year gap between them, and they both were developed by Infinity Ward. Basically, Sledgehammer shouldn't have been working on a Modern Warfare game to begin with. That sub-series was established by Infinity Ward. They're the ones that should have developed a third game, and Activision knew that, but they forced Sledgehammer to develop a sequel anyway. This is a clear example of studio interference in the gaming business. This entire game is the fault of Activision. Everything that's wrong with Modern Warfare 3 is their fault because they chose to rush a game that would have been better suited under the normal 3-year development cycle that these Call of Duty games usually are put through. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is a total embarrassment for both the series and Activision itself. And with some luck, the Call of Duty fanbase will never have to be subjected to such incompetence, to such mediocrity, to such pure dog shit for as long as this franchise exists again.